One of the main political topics in the Western world today is migration. In the United States, it's the border wall, and in the last year or so, the increasing number of raids by ICE, the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement Agency. In my home country, the discussions centre more around stopping these small boats crossing from France into the UK with asylum seekers. There are similar discussions all over Europe. Politicians all over the continent demand a return to control over borders, and in some cases they use more obvious dog whistle language about things like purity. In the Western imagination, Russia is often imagined as the opposite of this. Strict immigration laws, carefully controlled borders, making a country pretty much untouched by the problems of migration. But anyone who's actually been here knows that's completely false. That image would fall apart the moment you started looking around Moscow. This city, which is one of the most efficient, modern and well-maintained in the entire world, runs entirely on migration. It's the unspoken reality behind everything that works here. The people building the new buildings, new skyscrapers, repairing roads, sweeping streets, driving taxis, delivering food, cooking in cafes, stocking supermarket shelves, they're mostly economic migrants from Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan. Migrants from Central Asia make up more than 80% of the more than 10 million immigrants employed in Russia right now. They are the workforce that keeps the capital running, just like London, Paris, Berlin, or New York. Without migrants, this city would fall apart. By the way, if you're new here, I'm Johnny, a British guy who has been living in Moscow for 8 years. If you'd like to support my work and help me keep producing independent YouTube videos just like this one, I'd really appreciate it if you became a paid member of this channel. You can find more details in the video description. It genuinely helps me spend more time filming and researching and editing and producing these stories. Today's video comes to you from North Moscow. I'm at the northern river port, I guess you'd translate it as. This area used to be not so great when I first arrived 8 years ago, but it really got done up in the last 3 or 4 years. It's really beautiful. Now the old Soviet port building has had renovations, and all the I don't know what you call them in English, all the places where the boats stop and drop people off have been done up. It's a really lovely place to go for a walk if you live in northern Moscow, especially in the summer, of course. Today the weather's not so good, it's kind of grey. Autumn's already over, the leaves have already fallen, but still it's pretty busy with people walking their dogs on a Thursday afternoon. What I'm saying here is certainly not a secret to anyone in Moscow. It's not a secret at all that this city runs on migrants. I'm not revealing something that nobody knows. You see it absolutely everywhere. The delivery drivers lined up outside restaurants, checking their phones. The construction crews still working under floodlights long after midnight. That's especially common in the summer. You see the cleaners in the metro before dawn. They are the ones who make the city function, and without them, Moscow would seize up in like a week. Deliveries would stop, construction would halt, prices would rise, and the comfort that defines life here, a big reason why I live here, would vanish. And what's more, just like in the West, there's a tension that comes with migration. It's a tension between what people want to believe and what the economy demands. Like in the UK or the US, politicians here in Russia talk about migration as a negative. They speak about wanting to return to order, while television pundits link migrants to crime or terrorism. nationalist channels online frame large Muslim communities from Central Asia as a threat to Russian identity. And the tone can almost, it sounds almost identical to what you hear in Britain or the US. I'm from the UK, I live in Russia, I listen to media from both countries, and I hear the same things from both. It might be fear of difference or nostalgia for an imagined past, but it's always with the promise that if only the borders were tighter, life would be simpler and easier. So, does Russia have a migrant crisis? You could definitely argue that yes, it's experiencing a migration challenge, although it looks rather different to the kinds of migrant crises that people often reference in places like Britain or America. The so-called crises in the UK and the US centre around large numbers of asylum seekers and refugees, border crossings and undocumented arrivals that are beyond the state's capacity to absorb or integrate quickly. Russia's migration issue comes from the country needing more and more people to migrate here to keep the economy working, while they need all these people, at the same time, many politicians and a lot of the public, let's be honest, don't want this to happen. It's a part of Russia's unavoidable demographic crisis rather than it just a migrant issue. It's a similar situation actually to what's happening in Japan right now, where the population here is aging, birth rates are low, and the economy needs more and more people to fill the gaps. But of course, what's different about Russia is that millions of working age men have either emigrated or been mobilized. So the economy is running out of people, and it really needs them. And I'm not saying something controversial here. In fact, this is probably one of the very few things that officials in the Kremlin and I agree on. As Putin's press secretary Dmitry Peskov recently said, migrants are a necessity. We live in the largest country in the world, but there are too few of us. And he's absolutely right. Russia doesn't have the labour force it needs to grow. The numbers here are serious. Economists in Russia estimate a shortfall of several million workers by 2030. And that shortage isn't abstract either. It's a real issue, and it's already slowing construction, agriculture, manufacturing, logistics. When you have fewer hands, projects take longer and costs rise and growth stalls. Russia's economy absolutely depends on a steady labour input to keep producing at scale, and that input is disappearing. So the problem here, unlike the UK or the US, isn't all cultural or all political. In many ways, the migrant crisis that Russia has is simple arithmetic. It needs more people. So while of course there's boats in the river here, there's one right there that looks totally empty, there's also a plane. I guess it's like a seaplane. Let me zoom in. I don't know if I can zoom in. Oh, there we go. Zoom in. Stuff you don't expect to see. So I definitely wish I came to film this video in the summer or early in the autumn. Look how beautiful it would have been around here. Instead it's pretty grey. I think I wouldn't go far to say depressing, but that's Moscow in November for you. You don't get the beautiful autumn anymore, and the snow hasn't come, so it's the worst of all seasons. So one of the ways that Russia is looking to solve its migration problem is looking further afield than former Soviet countries to find even more help. Economic Minister Maxim Reshetnikov recently admitted that Russia needs to look, the phrase was, needs to look at completely new countries to attract labour. And that's a way of saying that the old pipeline, mainly from Central Asia, just isn't enough anymore. The demand for workers here has outgrown the supply of people willing to come to Russia under the current conditions. And those conditions have only become tougher in recent years. So Russia is looking now to South Asia and Africa, for example. At the same time as Russia needing to attract more migrants, laws are actually being tightened here sharply. And this was a particular focus of Putin following the awful terrorist attack on Crocus City Hall here in Moscow. So expulsions of migrants now are far quicker for anyone caught breaking the law. Penalties for illegal work are much harsher. The state is cracking down on intermediaries and informal labour networks that used to act as a buffer between people and the state. And for the most part, this is generally a good thing, as many of these networks are really exploiting people who are desperate and have no recourse. But this has had some bad knock-on effects. For example, a lost document or a bad employer can now mean instant deportation, well, within days. Many regions have also begun conducting raids on construction sites and dormitories, detaining hundreds of people at a time, sort of like what America is also seeing now with the expanded ICE raids. If you talk to business owners, you hear frustration. The demand for labour in Russia in 2025 certainly hasn't gone away. There are loads of jobs, but it's become harder to meet that demand because quotas are tight, paperwork is complex, and skilled Russians are in really high demand, and therefore they're in short supply. So companies that rely on migrants are now operating under growing uncertainty. Some companies now face fines or delays that make projects unviable, particularly in construction and agriculture, and each new inspection, each new fine adds cost and adds risk. Meanwhile, at the exact same time, public rhetoric keeps hardening, despite officials knowing very, very well that projects need migrants to be successful. You can feel the contradiction absolutely everywhere here. Moscow's streets are cleaner than ever. Its skyline is expanding rapidly every month, yet the people who make that possible live under the constant threat of being told they don't belong here anymore. A regional governor can stand in front of cameras and say, "We need workers, but we must choose those who fit." And yes, that's a real quote, all while local construction industry begs for anyone willing to take a shovel. It's a great contradiction between the rhetoric and the reality of economics. And just like in the West, so this might sound familiar to you, it's all wrapped up in the language of identity. The idea that migrants should adapt completely, speak Russian, follow local customs and fit the national character. And none of that is unreasonable in my opinion, but it has become a sort of code for exclusion because it's applied selectively. It's a way of saying to certain people from certain countries who look a certain way, we need you, but we don't want to see you. And as someone who lives here and someone who is, technically, I am a migrant, it's just really visible how invisible this labour has become. It's like hidden in plain sight, but holding absolutely everything together. Like in much of the world today, migration in Russia is not a side story anymore. It's actually a foundational block of the modern Russian economy. Yet instead of acknowledging that openly, the political system prefers the illusion of control. It passes strict laws. It stages raids for the cameras and always talks about cultural fit, all while really depending on migration for everything. It depends on the people. The whole of Russia economy depends on the people these politicians target. But you could copy and paste that same story onto America, onto the UK. Actually, probably the UK more because we have such a small population and it fits perfectly. So this is not a Russian problem. It's a problem that's all over the world right now. But you know, in the end, the reality about the migration debate can't really be about ideology. It just doesn't work. The reality is it's about numbers, and it's about the gap between what societies want to imagine and what they actually need. Russia likes to present itself as different from the West in many ways. I've argued many times that Russia is the West. And when it comes to migration, they're the same. Both face shrinking workforces, rising labour costs, and governments that promise control while relying on outsiders to hold everything together. Without foreigners, I don't mean Brits or Americans, I mean Central Asians, Russia would collapse. It's a far bigger threat than sanctions, that's for sure. So when I hear someone say that Russia has avoided the migration problems of the West, I think about the thousands of people I see every day sweeping, driving, building, delivering, and how dependent this city is on their work. They're not a side effect of modern life. They are the system that keeps it running. Russia runs on migration. Moscow, even more so, runs on migration. And that makes it far less different from the West than most people would like to believe.